Since Chamber has released into Valorant, he has overwhelmingly been the best Sentinel in the game. But the recent changes to Chamber took a very interesting approach to his nerf. Rather than nerfing his ultimate or his teleporters, which a lot of people would consider his best pieces of utility, Riot decided to take away one of his trip or trademark abilities. And while a lot of people disagreed with the way Riot went about this nerf, you can't deny the fact that it forces you into a trade-off when you're choosing the Sentinel for any given map. Do you opt for the Sentinel with more firepower in Chamber, or do you opt for the Sentinel that gives your team more information with its team utility? In this video, we'll go through every single map in Valorant and categorize each Sentinel into 3 roles. Optimal, meaning it's the best Sentinel pick for that given map. Viable, meaning it might not be the best pick, but if you know what you're doing with the agent, it can certainly work out. And not viable, meaning if you pick this agent on the given map, it's likely a throw. To start things off on Ascent, we have 2 agents for the optimal category, Killjoy and Chamber. As I mentioned in the intro, both of these agents play out a lot differently. Killjoy does a lot better of a job of using her utility to lock down the sites, whereas Chamber is a very reliable pick because of his ability to take out the operator on the defensive side. As far as pro play goes, teams typically use their utility that gives them pieces of information, such as Chamber's trademark or Killjoy's alarm bot, toward the mid or pizza area to alert the defending team when the attacking team has taken that piece of map control. Of course, outside of that, Killjoy can use more utility toward the site, whereas Chamber can pretty much set up wherever he wants in the pre-round, whether he wants to take aggression in mid, A main, or B main. For the viable category, we have both Sage and Cypher. Now, I know a lot of people are probably surprised to see Sage here, and I'll definitely say this, she is not a viable agent on this map if she's going to be your sole Sentinel. With all of the different lanes on this map, it's crucial to have a Sentinel that can give you a piece of information, and unfortunately, Sage can't do that. Sure, her wall can block off a choke point, but you guys are probably wondering why she falls into this viable category if she doesn't give you that information that you're looking for. And that's because a lot of pro teams paired the Chamber pick or the Killjoy pick with the Sage as well. That's one interesting thing about Valorant. There are obviously 5 agents per team, but there's only 4 roles: Duelist, Initiator, Controller, and Sentinel. Meaning that no matter what map you play, you're always gonna have a double up on one of the 4 roles in Valorant. And for the longest time on Ascent, it was super popular to rock double Initiator and rock one of every other role. But as of recent, a lot of teams are rocking the composition that the Pittsburgh Knights made famous, which was the Killjoy Sage double Sentinel comp. Of course, now a lot of teams are replacing the Killjoy with Chamber as well, but the point still holds, and that Sage is only rocked here when 2 Sentinels are in play. Cypher also falls into the viable category, and way back when, there was a time where Cypher was definitely meta here, and similarly to the other 2 agents that I mentioned, a lot of teams would put a tripwire in mid or the pizza area to alert them when the attackers have pushed up. You can couple that with a bunch of unique one-way cages and really interesting camera spots to get information for your team, but overall, Cypher as an agent is most comparable to Killjoy, and the tight lanes that can be found going into A main or the 2 lanes on site, whether it's stairs or lane, are so much more effective if they're locked down by a Killjoy over a Cypher. As we move over to Bind, we have 2 agents that fall into the optimal category: Chamber and Sage. Now, one thing I really love about Bind is that the meta is never stale on this map. There are certain maps in Valorant like Breeze that are super predictable when it comes to the team comp that pro teams will use. But Bind is very unpredictable in the fact that you don't know what you're gonna get. Are you gonna get a team that rocks double Initiator, double Controller, or double Sentinel? As for Chamber and Sage, of course there's a trade-off here. 100 Thieves has recently been rocking Sage as their only Sentinel, which means that you're not gonna have a tripwire to watch the flank. So if you decide to go down this route with the Sage pick, you're gonna need one person on your team, especially on the attacking side, to always be playing back to be aware of this flank. But with Chamber, of course, you do have this tripwire to alert you. And in regards to Chamber, who's definitely the more popular pick on Bind as opposed to Sage, you play him like you do on every other map in the game. By the way, if you haven't seen the How Pros Play Chamber video that I created, go check it out as we cover how Optic Ye played Chamber throughout Masters 1 in Iceland. As we move over to the viable category, there are actually no agents here, meaning that both Cypher and Killjoy fall into the not viable category on Bind. Now, I know a lot of my viewers in lower elo are going to be surprised by this pick, but both Cypher and Killjoy have not been picked on Bind in pro play in literally months. They had a 0% pick rate in North America's Stage 1 and Stage 2 qualifiers. They had a 0% pick rate in Masters 1. They had a 0% pick rate in Champions of last year. These 2 agents simply are not played on this map. So while I think you can get away with it if you're playing in some silver elo lobbies, they're definitely not viable in regards to pro play. And the reason for that is because controllers on this map do just as good of a job as locking down the site as a Sentinel would. As we move on to Breeze, we have a very similar situation here where there are 2 Sentinels that are very commonly played and 2 that are never played at all. The 2 that are commonly played are Chamber and Cypher. Chamber's very good for obvious reasons on this map. A lot of long-range engagements favor his teleporters and op ability. Now, Cypher was never played before Chamber got nerfed because he basically offered exactly what Cypher did with his 2 trademarks, just like Cypher has 2 trips. But now that Chamber has been nerfed to only have 1 trademark, Cypher is starting to come back into the meta again. For example, in VCT Stage 2 qualifiers for North America, Chamber has a 60% pick rate on this map, whereas Cypher has a 40% pick rate. The additional bit of information that you can get from a second tripwire really does go a long way, and obviously some teams think it's more valuable than Chamber's op ability and the aggressive TPs that he can use. Compare that to Masters 1 Reykjavik before Chamber got nerfed. Chamber had a 100% pick rate on this map, where Cypher wasn't even played at all. So that goes to show that the nerf to Chamber's trademark ability is definitely working. As I mentioned before, there are no Sentinels that fall into the viable category. There was a time where Killjoy was sparingly played here on this map, but I feel as though she's just not viable because of the fact that her utility doesn't have unlimited range. I think if you change that one aspect about Killjoy, then she would be much more viable on this map, but as a result, we have to put her and Sage, who has no information on this map at all, into the not viable category. By the way, guys, if you haven't checked it out, I've already done this style of video for the initiators and the controllers of Valorant. I'll have those 2 videos listed in the description below if you want to check them out after this video. Also, just a reminder that I stream on the Purple streaming platform Monday through Friday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. We have a great community and I look forward to seeing you there. And if you guys are enjoying the content, make sure you click that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you know when we post a new video every single Sunday. With that being said, let's move on to our next map. Fracture is an interesting map regarding the Sentinel meta because when this map first released, it was Killjoy's safe haven. But as teams quickly started to pick Breach on this map, the power of Killjoy farming the orbs to ult underneath B site quickly had no use. And that was one of the major reasons why teams were opting for Killjoy on this map, because of how fast she could get her ultimate ability every few rounds. And since the release of this map, the meta has changed quite a lot. More recently, we're seeing teams rock double Sentinel on this map with Chamber to bring out that power of the operator and Sage as the second Sentinel, which we haven't seen until super recently. But as you guys know, the pro meta shifts quickly. And as soon as some teams had success while using Sage as the second Sentinel on this map, more and more teams started to adopt that team composition. Sage is really good here in the post plant as she can block off the entirety of CT spawn to A site. Same thing with Sage on the defensive side. There are 4 major choke points and obviously the attackers can pinch the defenders because of the way the map is set up. So having a Sage wall to completely block off one of those 4 choke points is super valuable as gamble stacks are really common on this map. In the viable category, we have both Cypher and Killjoy. So yes, with these 2 agents falling into the viable category, that means there aren't any Sentinels that are not viable on this map. While I don't think Cypher and Killjoy are the best picks on this map, the information that they can provide is undeniably good. And again, that's especially important on a map with such a unique design like Fracture. As we move over to Haven, this is a map that I thought would see more of an adjustment after Chamber's nerf. But surprisingly, in the last 2 weeks of NA's qualifiers, Chamber has just as high of a pick rate as he did before the nerf. With that pick rate at 80%, Chamber's the only Sentinel that falls into the optimal category. Chamber's ability to take aggressive picks and retain map control on this map is unmatched by any other Sentinel. And because there are 3 sites here, that map control is arguably more valuable on this map than any other map in the game. As we move over to the viable category, the only other Sentinel that has any sort of pick rate in NA's stage 2 qualifiers is Killjoy, who has the remaining 20% of picks. Killjoy's utility is really good to set up between B site and garage here. For example, putting an alarm bot to alert the defenders when the attacking team has taken control of here, but also using their turret on the front of B site. This acts very similarly to Chamber did when he had 2 trips, but you combine that with the nanoswarms that you have on top of it, and Killjoy is more than viable here. I also think Cypher falls into the viable category for the reasons that I mentioned before. When Chamber had 2 trips, it was super common for teams to trip the front of B site and then garage, just like we talked about with Killjoy, to give teams information and play a little bit more passively on this part of the map. That's a super common theme on Haven. Because there are 3 different sites, it's very common to give up a certain part of the map and place some utility that can give you information there while you gamble stack another part of the map. The only agent that falls into the not viable category is Sage. She's the only agent out of this list that doesn't have any sort of trip to watch the flank. As we move over to Icebox, this is another one of the maps where the double Sentinel meta is thriving. The 2 Sentinels that most teams rock are both Chamber and Sage. Now look, if you're playing Sage and you're walling tube every round, you're doing it wrong. That was a meta from a year ago that has long passed. But with that being said, Sage's wall still provides loads of value no matter where you set her up. I've seen a lot of pro teams play contact on A, so when they're defending on A site and the other team makes contact there, they'll wall off one of the lanes there. And I've also seen teams like Optic who wall super deep in B main right away to prevent the attackers from getting any control of that B long area. Regarding Chamber, his op power on this map is unmatched, especially since the recent nerf to Jet. Of course, it's super common for teams to place Chamber's trademark in Kitchen. That will alert teams of any sort of lurk that's going on there. So when you combine that with Chamber's ability to take aggressive angles on the defensive side, he's really just unmatched on this map. As we move over to the viable category, here's where we find Killjoy. Now I've seen some recent stats, particularly from Thinking Man's Valorant, where Killjoy, who has a relatively low pick rate on this map, has a super high success rate in the events where she is played. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier. While Killjoy can't provide you with any op ability, she provides so much more information than Chamber does. And in some instances, specifically with the G2 comp that had no duelists and 3 Sentinels in Sage, Chamber, and Killjoy, you don't even have to make the sacrifice for Killjoy over Chamber in the first place. And yes, you heard that right. G2 rocked 0 duelists on this map, And when you think about it, it kind of makes sense. A duelist's job is to create space when going into a site, but because of Icebox's unique layout, you don't really need to create space with a jet dash in the first place. So for those reasons, Killjoy falls into the viable category. Cypher's the only agent that falls into the not viable category, and I just don't think his tripwires provide enough value here. They're very easy to maneuver around in regards to flank because of these weird boxes that people can just jump over. And overall, there are just other sentinels that can provide more value than Cypher can on this given map. As we move over to split, this might surprise you guys a little bit. All 4 of the sentinel agents are going to fall into the optimal category here on this map. Now, obviously, I'm not suggesting that you guys rock a 4 sentinel comp here, but I think you could pick any 2 of these agents and justify using them on this map together. Typically, it's 1 sentinel and then Sage, which is kind of a sentinel of her own, but I really think that any of the other 3 sentinels can be combined with Sage and used uniquely here. Cypher has some really good one-way cages and has 2 trips, which again, Chamber doesn't have anymore. And on the attack side of things, I like what Cypher provides with his cage lineups that can block off vision from A site to A main. This can allow the attacking team to have some successful lurks going up to A ramp. There's no other sentinel that can provide what Cypher can here, so Cypher gives me a slight edge as the favorite between Cypher, Killjoy, and Chamber. With that being said though, we all know Chamber's power on this map, and I think Killjoy provides very similar information that Cypher does, in addition to her nanoswarms that can completely slow down a push. So for all those reasons, all 4 of the sentinels fall into the optimal category on split. The Valorant meta is ever evolving, so I'm curious to see what you guys think of my picks. Let me know down in the comments section below. Make sure you guys check out one of the other videos in this series where I cover the best initiator for every map and the best controller for every map. And with that being said, I look forward to seeing you guys next time. Peace.